What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my first video since FPL officially launched for the 2024-25 season. I'm going to take you through what my first draft is looking like. If you're excited for FPL to be back, make sure to give the video a like. And if you don't want to miss any of the content throughout this season, hit that subscribe button as well. I'm also happy to say that I'm partnering with Fantasy Football Hub again this season. And at the moment, they've got a 50% off offer on. And to check that out, you can just click the link in the description below. Loads of tools over there to help you win at FPL. And if you do sign up and you're a new member and you don't win your mini league, you can get your money back. Terms and conditions apply. All the links you need in the description below. Otherwise, let's get into it. All right, let's start with the defensive players first of all. Now, I'm quite glad that I didn't pre-record this video because we had so many price reveals. I could have put a video together based on them only and released it a little bit earlier, but I thought I'd wait until the game launched to see all the prices, and I was surprised to see that Chelsea goalkeepers are all 4.5 million or below. Now, at that price point, there is quite a few good options like Sells at Nottingham Forest, Johnson and Henderson at Crystal Palace, Verbruggen at Brighton, but I thought Chelsea goalkeepers would be 5 million. But Sanchez, Kepa and Petrovic are all 4.5. Now, part of the issue is they've got a new manager, Maresca, and we're not quite sure who's going to be number one. But the reports currently are that Sanchez is going to be the number one goalkeeper. And obviously that price point is quite enticing, I would say. They have got Man City at home first game of the season. So the chances are if you go for Sanchez or any Chelsea goalkeeper, they're not going to keep a clean sheet. But the fixtures afterwards are pretty decent. So it's Wolves away, Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away, Brighton at home, Forest at home. Then it's Liverpool away, Newcastle at home. And obviously at that point, you may have spare transfers or you might be looking to wildcard and stuff like that. So I think if we know who the first choice goalkeeper is at Chelsea for 4.5, I'm going to go for them. I don't see any point right now, at least, spending 5 million. There's some good options at that price point. Onana at Man United, Pickford at Everton, etc. But Sanchez at 4.5 seems like a pretty decent option to me. In defence, Trent is 7 million. He hasn't been that price point for a few years now. The bonus point system has changed slightly. So defenders are going to get -4 BPS for every goal they concede. So if Liverpool were to concede and Trent was to get an attack and return, he's much less likely to get bonus. But it's still a possibility. And obviously if they do get clean sheets on top of what we know he can do from an attacking sense, 7 million could feel pretty cheap. And I'll talk about the attack in a minute, but I don't feel like I've made a huge amount of sacrifices to fit Trent in. I feel like I can get him and still have a pretty good team elsewhere. And Liverpool's opening fixtures again, like Chelsea, are pretty decent. Ipswich away first game of the season. And then it's Brentford at home, Man United away, Forest at home, and Bournemouth at home. So first 5 game weeks, 3 home games, which are good, and Ipswich away. The hardest game for a clean sheet is probably Man United away, but in the last couple of seasons, Liverpool have done okay against Man United. So we'll have to wait and see how they perform under Slot, etc. But I like Liverpool's fixtures, and we know Trent is capable of outscoring a 7 million price point. He's done it before. Last year was not great. He finished on 122 points, but before that, it's like 156 plus in every season where he's played regular minutes. So I really like Trent Alexander-Arnold. The other 2 players in my back 3 for game week 1 are Mykolenko at Everton. When I saw the prices revealed for Branthwaite and Tarkowski, I thought 5 million was a little bit steep for an Everton defender. I know they did really well last year and Everton defence was decent, but 5 million just still felt like too much. So to be able to get Mykolenko for 4.5 feels quite nice. And at that price point, there's a lot of options. So you can kind of take your pick. It's Brighton at home game week 1. And then Murillo is also in from Nottingham Forest, who's got Bournemouth at home in game week 1. And then after that, I'll just double check here. The next 2 fixtures aren't too bad either. Southampton away and Wolves at home. And Nottingham Forest were pretty decent last year in terms of defensive numbers. Can they carry that on into this season? We'll have to wait and see. But for 4.5, it might be worth that risk. And then on the bench, I've got Munoz from Crystal Palace, who was fairly attacking under Glasner last season. I'm not sure he is a shoe-in for me because he does cost 5 million. And for Crystal Palace, you can get Anderson instead, who's only 4.5. And last season, he was the highest scoring defender for Crystal Palace. And early on, he did get a couple of attack and returns. So it was 2 goals, 3 assists in total for him last season. So I am questioning whether I need to spend the 0.5 extra. But also, when you're putting drafts together early on, it's very difficult to leave the money in the bank. I could just have Anderson and 0.5 in the bank, but I've gone for Munoz instead. He is slightly more attacking. I'm just not sure he's worth that extra 0.5. And then my last defender at 4.5 is Dunk, who's got Everton away, but I'm just going to bench him first game and just use him when needed. I'm expecting Brighton to be a bit better defensively. Now De Zerbi's not there, and Dunk does have some set-piece threat, I should say, and himself is fairly attacking. I think there's lots of 4 million defenders this season you can pick from, especially from the newly promoted clubs that are going to play. But for an extra 0.5, that 4.5 million price point, I just feel like you get such better options that it's just worth paying that a little bit more for. So just to quickly show you the attacking differences between Munoz and Anderson at Crystal Palace, you've got the Opta Stats tool on Fantasy Football Hub. If you want to check that out and all the other tools they've got, links in the description below, as always. And I've got it set to per 90 minutes, and I've got my custom stats up, so expected goals and expected assists as well. So if I go to Munoz and just bring him up here a second, he put up 0.08 non-penalty expected goals per 90 last year and 0.08 expected assists, which is pretty decent. And then if we go to Anderson, and obviously Glasner was not in charge the whole time as well. If we go to Anderson, he was 0.05 non-penalty XG and 0.05 expected assists. So there's not a massive difference there. And I feel like if I was looking at my team and I really needed 0.5 elsewhere, I would definitely downgrade to Anderson. But I think if you've got the money and it doesn't affect any of your other picks, Munoz is probably slightly better. So my midfield is pretty stacked, but that's mostly because I'm missing a certain striker, which I'll talk about in a minute. I've got 3 midfielders priced at 10 million or above, so that's Saka, Palmer and Salah. And then the other 2 players are Nkunku and Eze, and I'll talk about them first. With Nkunku, I think when he came to Chelsea last season, there was a lot of expectations that he was going to hit the ground running. He had so many goals and assists from the Bundesliga. I personally felt like he would easily convert that into returns in the Premier League. Not necessarily the same amount, but enough where he would be good value. Unfortunately, we never really saw that because he was injured for so much of the season. But the good thing about that from an FPL point of view is he's now had a price drop. I believe last year, I'm just going to double check, he was 7.5 million. Yeah, he was. And I think he was listed as a forward. Now he's had a $1 million price drop and he's a midfielder. And if he can just get fit and he gets regular minutes in that Chelsea team, I just don't see how he won't make, I won't say a mockery of that price point, but I definitely think he's one of those players that can outscore 6.5 million. And again, like with Sanchez, it is Man City at home first game of the season. But if he can get any kind of return in that game and then people see the good fixtures afterwards, suddenly there could be a bit of a bandwagon that happens. We need to see Chelsea in pre-season in terms of how they line up, because they do have quite a few options that can play in those attacking spaces, or in those attacking roles, I should say. But I think either as a centre forward, a second striker off the left, I just don't see how he won't be in that team. And 6.5 just feels too good. Like last season, I really wanted him at 7.5, and this just feels even better. So he is in the draft for now. Eze, I don't know, at 7 million, that just feels too cheap to me. He's 0.5 less than Gordon and Bowen, but he's got penalties. I'm pretty sure he will be the penalty taker for Palace. And look, Palace overall might be slightly worse off without Elise, but I don't think it's going to affect Eze's FPL output. If anything, it might make him even better, because if they're going to score, he's going to have to be more involved. And 7 million, it just feels cheap when you compare him to other players. Like you're paying 0.5 million more than Nkunku, March, Neto, Grealish, etc. But you're getting penalties and you're getting guaranteed minutes, and he takes pretty much, or at least most set pieces as well. Like he would take direct free kicks. So Eze for me, look, we're very early on in pre-season. So much can change when we get more information, injuries, pre-season lineups and stuff like that. But I think Eze feels like, not locked, but I feel like he'll be in a lot of drafts. Because after Brentford away, it's West Ham at home, then it's Chelsea, which is a bit tougher. But then it's Leicester at home, so newly promoted side. Obviously, they'll be a bit stronger than the than the promoted sides last season, but it's still a good fixture. And Man United at home could be decent as well, because they conceded so many shots last year. It just looks all round pretty good for Eze. So they are my 2 cheaper midfielders. And then it was just a case of wanting to fit everyone else in. Like obviously, Palmer's had a massive price increase over last year, but his numbers were so good in terms of expected goals, expected assists. Let me just quickly look them up here. Again, on Fantasy Football Hub. Palmer, he put up 0.35 non-penalty, by the way, expected goals, and 0.28 expected assists. and you've got the minutes with him, there's no way he's not in that 11 week to week. And there's no reason that he would lose penalties either. So all round just looks like a really good option. And of course, you'd rather pay 5 million for him, but I think he can do well enough at that 10.5 price tag. And obviously, because of the way I've set this up, I can transfer him down to anyone else in just one move if it's not going well. I think one thing as well to consider over pre-season is how many minutes and the fitness levels of players that went late into the Euros and Copa America. And obviously, Palmer is one of those players. But unlike Saka, he didn't get a huge amount of minutes. So I'd be really surprised if he's not in that starting 11 for Man City. Saka, again, did play a lot for England, but I would expect him to be in that team in game week 1 for Arsenal. One of their main... Well, I wouldn't necessarily say he's their main man in the attack, but I think with penalties and minutes, there's a good reason that he costs 10 million. There is definitely a conversation to be had about whether Odegaard is worth going for instead because you save 1.5 million. And Odegaard's numbers last year were pretty good too. But I don't know. I've liked Saka for a long time now. I've had him for a lot the last couple of seasons, and I feel like even though his price has gone up, he can still make. What am I trying to say here? He can justify that price point. That's what I'm trying to say for 10 million. So I just kind of like it. I suspect as I play around with different drafts, one of Palmer or Saka would probably get downgraded just to spend a bit of money elsewhere. But I don't feel like I'm massively missing out apart from in the forwards, which I'm talking about in a minute. Like I've got Trent, I've got a 5 million defender. There's lots of 4.5 good options. Eze and Nkunku are potentially really good value. And then you've got Palmer and Salah as well. And Saka could even be a good captaincy option in game week 1 against Wolves at home. So I quite like him. And then Salah is in because of the fixtures, basically. Obviously, he's on penalties. They've also got a new manager, and I feel like I'm saying that about a lot of teams. But there's no way Salah's not in that 11. And there probably will be a bit of drop-off now that Jurgen Klopp's not there, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make Salah a bad option. And I think the kind of memories people have from last season that Salah just wasn't great. And it was his worst season in FPL in a Liverpool shirt, 211 points, but he still scored 18 goals. He still got 12 assists. His underlying numbers are still really good. Like he got 30 attack and returns from 28.36 expected goal involvement. Like he's still racking up the chances and creating chances as well. And after Ipswich away, Brentford at home, Man United away, Forest at home, Bournemouth at home, he's just really good. And you could even captain him game week 2 if you haven't got Haaland against Brentford at home. So for now, I've stacked the midfield and it looks great. But let's take a quick look at the forwards. So with this particular squad, I'd play 3-5-2 in game week 1. So the two forwards I've gone for is João Pedro and Alexander Isak. And then on the bench, I've got Adam Armstrong from Southampton, who's a 5.5 million penalty taken forward. Absolutely nailed on. Obviously, Southampton could make a bunch of signings throughout pre-season. That might change things. But as it stands, Armstrong looks like a pretty good option for the bench if you've got the money to spend. Usually, I prefer going for a cheap attacking option like a 4.5 million forward or a 4.5 million midfielder. But unless I feel like I'm missing out elsewhere and I need that money for something, there's nothing wrong with having a strong bench, because if someone misses out, they can be called upon. But also, if a player in your team gets an injury and they're out for just 1 week, it's just a minor thing, it sometimes means you've got less transfers to have to make if you've got someone on your bench that you can call upon instead. And Southampton do have Newcastle away in game week 1, and obviously they are newly promoted back into the Premier League, so it's not going to be easy. But after that, the fixtures get pretty good. Forest at home, Brentford away, Man United at home, Ipswich at home, and Bournemouth away. And I wouldn't have to necessarily play him every single week. So I quite like Adam Armstrong as an option. Do I think going for him up front when I've got João Pedro is also 5.5 million is ideal? Not necessarily, but it's almost part of a rotation. It's not like I'm playing João Pedro and Adam Armstrong every single week. I don't have Erling Haaland in this squad. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to go with him by the time we get to the deadline. I think the game's only just released. I wanted to wait for all the prices to come out. But I think you can make a pretty good squad without him. And if you're happy to bet against him in game week 2 for Ipswich at home, then maybe it could work out quite nicely. And when I say bet against him, I don't mean not buy him because you think he's not going to score. Because he is going to score in game week 2 against Ipswich. He's probably going to get a brace at a minimum. But it might be that overall it's better just not have him in the squad, because in the other weeks, hopefully the points will be a bit higher. I do worry a little bit about who I would captain in game week 2 without Haaland, because it's so good. But if I've got Salah against Brentford at home, That's not too bad. Palmer against Wolves away could be an option as well. So there are other players to go for, but I think it's worth making it clear Haaland is by far the best captaincy option in game week 2, and going without him does feel quite scary, but it could be worthwhile. I don't think it's actually that difficult to get him in as well as Salah, but you definitely can't have Saka and Palmer. You'd have to downgrade them to kind of 6 to 7 million options instead. But for now, I don't have Haaland. I suspect I will play around and get him in the squad sooner rather than later. João Pedro is a player that I think has been underpriced at 5.5. Under De Zerbi, look, I owned him last season. It was frustrating because he wasn't always in the team. But I think if we see in pre-season that he's regularly starting and it looks like he's going to be in that 11 for game week 1, I'm not sure we're going to see as much rotation. And even if he's not playing as the number 9, he could play as a number 10. And he was their first choice penalty taker. 5.5 minutes, it just... Look, sometimes things are just too good to be true and you just should ignore them. But I'm not sure that's the case with João Pedro. And the fixtures are also pretty good for Brighton. They're not amazing, but they're pretty good. Like Everton away, then Man United at home. Arsenal away is definitely tricky in game week 3. But then you've got Ipswich at home and Forest at home. And in game week 3, when he's got Arsenal away, Adam Armstrong has Brentford away instead. So I could even bench João Pedro for that Arsenal game and just play Armstrong instead. So I think that looks pretty good as a solid squad overall. The only player that's kind of a dud is the goalkeeper, but I don't really care about that. We've all been in a position before where we transfer out our goalkeepers or we do a rotation. It never works out. I just want to put in a 4.5 million goalkeeper and just run with it. And then lastly is Isak. I think he's firmly first choice now for Newcastle. There's no debate over that. If Wilson's there, yes, he can take minutes off Isak. But Isak's going to start. He's first choice number 9. He's on penalties. 21 goals last year. Southampton, Bournemouth, Spurs, Wolves, Fulham, first 5 games. If he's fit, and obviously he's had the summer off because Sweden, etc., weren't in Euro 2024, he's going to play. He's going to be fresh. And if he's fit, he just looks incredible for 8.5. There's a lot of options in the forwards between kind of 7.5 and 8.5, and I'm not going to go into great detail about them now, but like Nicholas Jackson, I don't mind at Chelsea if I had a free Chelsea spot, which I don't right now, but obviously I could change things around. Mateta I think is a bit overpriced personally because of Eze, but Tony, if he's still at Brentford, is not a bad option, but the fixtures aren't that great. You've got to play Liverpool, City and Spurs away from home in the first 5 game weeks. If Darwin or Gakpo were nailed, I really like them because Liverpool's fixtures are great. And if Darwin looks like he's going to be first choice number 9, I may even go for him, not necessarily instead of Isak, but as well as, and just reduce one of my midfielders. So there are options, and I will talk through them in all the content I got planned throughout pre-season, but Isak just looks great. So that's my first draft. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Hub. All the links you need for that are in the description below. And yeah, loads more content planned over pre-season right up until that deadline and obviously throughout the season as well. So hopefully you're going to join me for that. Hit subscribe and I'll catch you again soon.